She moved to a new city to hide from her ex, unaware the Korean Mafia boss lived next door. Keisha's breath caught in her throat as she stepped off the elevator on the 40th floor of the Sentinel Tower in downtown Chicago. The single cardboard box in her arms felt like it weighed 100 pounds. But she knew that was just her paranoia. Everything felt heavier these days. Her footsteps, her thoughts, the constant surveillance of shadows that had become as natural as blinking. 5 days ago, she had woken up at 3 a.m. to find Marcus sitting in the dark beside her bed, watching her sleep. She had installed a deadbolt 2 weeks prior, changed the locks, even got a restraining order. None of it mattered. He had simply looked down at her with that cold, calculating smile she had learned to dread and whispered, "You think a piece of paper stops me, Keisha? I built the security system at your office. I know every password you've ever used. You're mine. You'll always be mine. There's nowhere you can go that I won't find you." That was the moment Keisha knew she had to disappear. She had been planning her escape for 8 months before that night. Cash buried in the floorboards of her childhood bedroom at her mother's house. Research on cities with strong tenant privacy laws. A fake name, Kendra Williams, printed on lease documents she carried in her purse. She had memorized every statistic about digital stalking. She had studied the patterns. She had prepared for this moment. But preparing for something and actually living it were two entirely different things. Now she was here, standing in the most secure building she could afford. Her entire savings drained for the security deposit and 3 months' rent paid up front in cashier's checks. No paper trail left behind. New phone number. New email address. Her natural hair dyed jet black and cut into a sharp bob that made her look like someone else in the mirror. She had even taken a rideshare to a bus station 40 miles away, then another bus to Chicago, just to throw off any GPS tracking. This was supposed to be her dead zone, her fortress, her hiding place from the man who had spent 2 years turning her life into a surveillance state. The hallway stretched before her, all polished marble and recessed lighting that cast everything in a cool, expensive glow. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Chicago skyline, and the walls were painted a pristine white that seemed to promise sterility and safety. The whole floor screamed wealth in a way that made Keisha feel like she was trespassing. Her oversized gray hoodie and black leggings felt wrong here. Her box braids, even dyed darker, suddenly seemed too distinctive for this anonymous, quiet space. She adjusted her grip on the box and started walking toward apartment 40B, her new sanctuary. Then she stopped breathing. A man stood outside the door next to hers, apartment 40A. He was Korean, early 30s, with black hair styled with the kind of sharp precision that suggested military discipline or something darker. He wore a black tailored suit with a subtle gray pinstripe, no tie, the top button undone in a way that looked deliberate rather than casual. The suit probably cost more than she used to make in a month. His posture was perfectly still, controlled, like a blade at rest. And he was staring directly at her. Keisha fumbled with her keys for the 3rd time, hyper-aware of the man still standing in the hallway. She could feel his gaze on her back like a physical weight. The lock finally clicked open, and she practically fell into apartment 40B, slamming the door behind her with more force than she intended. The sound echoed through the empty space. She pressed her back against the door, heart hammering, and forced herself to count to 10. This was exactly the kind of reaction she needed to stop having. Not every man was Marcus. Not every stranger was a threat. She was safe here. She had to be. The apartment was pristine and soulless. Hardwood floors that gleamed under the afternoon light. A kitchen with granite countertops she would never use. Floor-to-ceiling windows that made her feel exposed despite being 40 stories up. She walked to the glass and stared out at the city, trying to let the distance calm her. But the silence was suffocating. She had grown used to noise in her old life. Marcus's constant phone calls, the ping of his monitoring apps, the sound of his footsteps in her apartment when she thought she was alone. Now there was nothing. Just the faint hum of climate control and the occasional creak of an expensive building settling into itself. Over the next 3 days, Keisha barely left her apartment. She ordered groceries through an app, using her new name and a prepaid card. She kept the curtains half drawn. She checked the locks obsessively. and she noticed things about apartment 40A that made her skin prickle with unease. Men in dark suits came and went at odd hours. Never loud, never obvious, but always there. 2 in the morning, 5 in the afternoon. They moved with the kind of synchronized efficiency that reminded her of Secret Service agents in movies. They never spoke in the hallway. They never made eye contact. And they always knocked twice before entering 40A, a sharp, rhythmic pattern that sounded like a code. One evening, she pressed her ear against the shared wall between their apartments, holding her breath. She expected to hear voices, music, something human. Instead, there was only that same terrible silence. It was as if the man next door existed in a vacuum, surrounded by ghosts in expensive suits who guarded secrets she couldn't begin to imagine. Song Joon-kai stood in his study, fingers steepled beneath his chin, watching the security footage from the hallway on his tablet. He replayed the moment his new neighbor had stepped off the elevator for the 5th time. The woman had checked over her shoulder 3 times in the span of 15 seconds. Her grip on that single box had been white-knuckled, desperate. And when she had seen him in the hallway, the fear in her eyes hadn't been the usual wariness people showed when they sensed something dangerous. It had been something rawer, older, the kind of fear that came from experience, not instinct. She was running from something, or someone. Joon-kai had seen that look before. On his mother's face, years ago, when his father's business rivals had sent their threats. In the eyes of women, his syndicate had extracted from situations that left scars deeper than any blade could cut. He pressed the intercom button on his desk. "Minho, my office." His lead enforcer appeared within 30 seconds, silent as always. Minho was a wall of a man, former ROK Special Forces, with a scar that ran from his left eyebrow to his jawline. He had been with Joon-kai for 8 years and had never questioned an order. "The woman in 40B, Joon-kai said, sliding the tablet across the desk. "I need everything, real name. Previous address, employment history, criminal record, known associates. And I want to know if anyone's looking for her." Minho's expression didn't change, but Joon-kai caught the slight tilt of his head. A question without words. "She's afraid," Joon-kai said quietly, "and not of me, find out why." 48 hours later, Minho returned with a file that made Joon-kai's jaw tighten. Her real name was Keisha Banks, 25 years old, executive secretary at a mid-sized consulting firm she had quit 2 weeks ago without notice. No criminal record, no outstanding warrants, but there was a restraining order filed against Marcus Devon, a cybersecurity contractor with a specialty in surveillance systems and digital forensics. The police reports painted a picture that turned Joon-kai's blood cold. Stalking, hacking, financial manipulation. One officer had noted that the victim showed signs of severe psychological trauma and believed the perpetrator had capabilities that exceeded standard law enforcement intervention. Joon-kai closed the file and looked out his window toward the city lights. "Keep eyes on her building entrance," he said. "If anyone matching Devon's description appears within a mile radius, I want to know immediately." Some monsters, he thought, needed to be dealt with in ways the law couldn't handle. Keisha was 3 seconds away from a full panic attack when her door lock jammed for the 4th time that evening. She had gone down to the mailroom to check her box, empty, thankfully, and now the electronic keypad on her door was flashing red, refusing to accept her code. Her hands started shaking. She tried the code again. Red light, again, red light. "No, no, no," she whispered, pressing her forehead against the door. She couldn't be locked out. Not here. Not when this apartment was the only place that felt even remotely safe. The system glitches, sometimes after maintenance. Keisha spun around, her back slamming against the door. It was him. The man from 40A. He stood a respectful distance away, hands visible at his sides, his expression carefully neutral. Up close, she could see the sharp lines of his jaw, the way his dark eyes seemed to catalog everything about her in a single glance. "I didn't mean to startle you," he said, his voice low and measured, with the faintest trace of an accent. "The building did electrical work this morning. It reset some of the lock protocols." Keisha's throat felt tight. How do I fix it? May I? He gestured toward her door but didn't move closer. She hesitated, every instinct screaming at her to say no. But she was locked out, and he was asking permission, and something about the careful distance he maintained made her nod. He approached slowly, pulling out his phone. The override code is in the resident portal. I had the same issue last month. His fingers moved across the screen with practiced efficiency, then he held the phone up so she could see. 84779. Enter that, then your regular code. Keisha took a shaky breath and punched in the numbers. The light flashed green. The lock clicked open. Relief flooded through her so intensely she felt dizzy. Thank you, she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. You're welcome. He stepped back, creating space again. Then he paused. I'm Junkai, Song Junkai. If you need anything, I'm next door. Before she could respond, he turned and walked back to 40A with that same controlled grace, disappearing inside without looking back. Keisha stood in her doorway, her heart still racing, but for the first time in 2 years, it wasn't entirely from fear. That man had seen her panic, had helped her, and then had walked away without asking for anything in return. It was the smallest gesture, but it felt like everything. Keisha was halfway through her morning coffee when her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. She had been feeling almost normal for the first time in weeks. The sun was streaming through her windows. The city looked beautiful from 40 stories up. She had even been considering going for a walk later, maybe exploring the neighborhood. Then she saw the notification. Unknown number, one image attached. Her hand trembled as she unlocked her phone. The coffee mug slipped from her other hand and shattered against the hardwood floor, but she barely registered the sound. The photo was of her front door. Apartment 40B, the brass numbers gleaming under the hallway's recessed lighting. The angle was slightly off-center, taken from near the elevator. Recent. The timestamp said it had been sent 3 minutes ago. Below the image, a text message appeared. Nice place, 40th floor. Must have cost you everything you had hidden away. Did you really think I wouldn't find you, Keisha? Her vision blurred. The room tilted. She dropped the phone and backed away from it like it was a venomous snake, her shoulders hitting the wall behind her. Marcus knew where she was. He had been here, in her building, on her floor, standing outside her door while she slept. Another buzz. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move, but she could see the screen lighting up from where the phone had fallen. I'm always watching, you know that. You can change your name, change your hair, run to a different city. It doesn't matter. You're mine, Keisha. You'll always be mine. A sound escaped her throat, something between a sob and a scream. Her legs gave out and she slid down the wall, pulling her knees to her chest. All the money she had saved, all the careful planning, the new identity, the security deposit on the safest building she could find, none of it mattered. He had found her in less than 2 weeks. She rocked back and forth, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The walls of her sanctuary were closing in. The silence she had feared was now deafening, broken only by the sound of her phone buzzing again, and again with messages she couldn't bear to read. There was nowhere left to run. Marcus had made sure she knew it. Junkai heard the scream through the wall. It was muffled, choked off almost immediately, but he had been trained to recognize the sound of terror. He was on his feet and out his door within seconds, his hand instinctively reaching for the gun holstered beneath his suit jacket. He stopped outside 40B, listening. No sounds of a struggle, no voices, just ragged breathing and what might have been crying. He knocked. Miss Banks, are you all right? Silence, then footsteps, unsteady and shuffling. The door opened a crack, the chain still engaged. Keisha's face appeared in the gap, and Junkai felt something cold settle in his chest. Her eyes were red and swollen, mascara streaked down her cheeks. She looked absolutely shattered. I'm fine, she whispered, but her voice broke on the words. You're not. He kept his tone gentle, non-threatening. What happened? She shook her head, already closing the door. I can't. Please, just go. The door clicked shut. Junkai stood there for a long moment, his jaw tight, then returned to his apartment and pulled out his phone. Minho, status update on Marcus Devon, now. The response came back within minutes. Devon had boarded a flight to Chicago 2 days ago. He had checked into a hotel in the Loop under his own name, arrogant enough not to bother hiding. And according to building security footage Minho had already accessed, a man matching his description had entered the Sentinel Tower that morning, posing as a food delivery driver. Junkai's expression went cold. "I want a 3-man rotation on this building, 24/7, he said quietly into the phone. "No one enters or exits this floor without my knowledge. Run facial recognition on every person who comes through the lobby. If Devon gets within 100 feet of this building again, intercept him before he reaches the elevators." He paused, looking at the wall he shared with Keisha's apartment. "And I want surveillance on his hotel room. Phone taps, location tracking, everything. I need to know what he's planning before he plans it." Minho's voice was measured on the other end. "Understood. What level of intervention are we authorizing?" Junkai walked to his window and stared out at the city lights, his reflection cold and merciless in the glass. "Whatever it takes to keep her safe. I don't care what you have to do. He doesn't touch her again." Keisha hadn't meant to end up in Junkai's apartment. But when she had locked herself out again, this time leaving her keys on the counter while taking out the trash, he had been the one to find her sitting in the hallway, too exhausted and defeated to even cry. "Come inside," he had said quietly. "I'll call building maintenance." Now she sat on his leather sofa, a glass of water in her trembling hands, while he spoke in rapid Korean on his phone in the next room. His apartment was immaculate, all dark wood and minimalist furniture, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lining one wall. She stood up to examine the titles, needing something to focus on besides the panic still thrumming through her veins. That's when she saw it. The bookshelf had shifted slightly, revealing a narrow gap in the wall behind it. And through that gap, she could see the unmistakable outline of a handgun mounted on a rack. Not just one, several, along with something that looked like tactical equipment. Her breath caught. She took a step back, then another, her mind racing. Who was this man? What had she stumbled into? "Keisha." She spun around. Junkai stood in the doorway, his phone gone, his expression unreadable. He had seen where she was looking. "I can explain," he said. "You have a wall of guns." Her voice came out high and thin. "Who are you?" He was quiet for a long moment, then moved to close the gap in the bookshelf with deliberate care. When he turned back to her, something had shifted in his eyes, a mask dropping. "My name is Song Junkai. I run the Silver Dragon Syndicate. We operate throughout the Midwest, primarily in logistics and trade." He paused. "Some of it legal, most of it not." Keisha's legs felt weak. You're a criminal." "Yes." No hesitation, no apology. "But I'm also the man who's had 3 guards watching your building for the past 4 days to make sure Marcus Devon doesn't get near you again." The room tilted. "What?" Junkai took a careful step closer, his hands visible, non-threatening. "I know what he did to you. I know what he's still trying to do. And I promise you, Keisha, my darkness exists to protect people like you. He will never hurt you again." Keisha should have run, should have called the police, grabbed her things, and disappeared again. But she stayed frozen in Junkai's living room, staring at this man who had just admitted to being a criminal while simultaneously promising to protect her. "Why?" The word came out broken. "Why would you help me? You don't even know me." Junkai's jaw tightened. He walked to the window, his back to her, silhouetted against the Chicago skyline. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than she had ever heard it. "My mother was 23 when she married my father. He was a businessman, respected in our community in Seoul. She didn't know that his business was a front for the Japak, the Korean mob." He paused. "And she didn't know that one of his rivals had decided the best way to hurt him was through her." Keisha's throat constricted. "They took her from a market in broad daylight, held her for 6 days. His reflection in the glass was perfectly still, but his hands had curled into fists at his sides. "My father paid the ransom, got her back, But she was never the same. The fear lived in her eyes every day after that. She couldn't sleep, couldn't leave the house, couldn't trust anyone. June Kai. She took her own life when I was 12 years old. His voice didn't waver, but the words landed like stones. Left a note saying she couldn't live as a ghost anymore, that the men who took her had killed her 6 years earlier, and her body just hadn't realized it yet. Silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. I joined my father's organization at 16, he continued. Learned everything, built my own syndicate by 25, and I swore that I would never let another woman disappear into that kind of fear while I had the power to stop it. He finally turned to face her, and Keisha saw something raw in his eyes that made her chest ache. You remind me of her, he said quietly. The way you check the locks, the way you flinch at sudden sounds, the way you're trying so hard to convince yourself you're safe when you know you're not. He took a breath. I couldn't save my mother, but I can save you. The power outage hit at 2:47 a.m. Keisha woke to complete darkness, her heart already racing before her mind caught up. The hum of the climate control had died. The small LED lights on her appliances were gone. Even the ambient glow from the city outside seemed dimmed. Then she heard it, the mechanical whir of the stairwell door opening on her floor. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming closer. She scrambled out of bed, her phone clutched in her shaking hand, but there was no signal, no way to call for help. Marcus had done this before, back in her old apartment. Cut the power, disabled her phone, made her helpless. The footsteps stopped outside her door. Keisha, Marcus's voice drifted through the wood, sickeningly familiar. I know you're awake. I can hear your breathing. You always breathe so fast when you're scared. She backed toward the window, trapped, 40 floors up, nowhere to run. Open the door, baby. We can talk about this. About how you embarrassed me. About how you're going to make it right. A keycard beeped. He had somehow cloned her access code. The lock disengaged with a soft click. The door swung open. But Marcus never made it across the threshold. The emergency lights flickered on, bathing the hallway in red, and Keisha saw June Kai step out of the shadows behind Marcus. 2 of his guards materialized from the stairwell. Another emerged from the elevator shaft. Marcus spun around, his expression shifting from predatory confidence to confusion to something that might have been fear. Who the hell? June Kai's fist connected with Marcus's jaw before he could finish the sentence. The crack echoed through the hallway. Marcus staggered back, blood streaming from his mouth. You made a mistake coming here, June Kai said, his voice cold and precise. He nodded to his men. Take him. They moved with practiced efficiency, pinning Marcus's arms behind his back. He tried to struggle, tried to speak, but Minho pressed something against his neck and his eyes rolled back. June Kai turned to Keisha, who stood frozen in her doorway. His expression softened. It's over, he said quietly. He'll wake up in a federal holding cell with enough evidence of cybercrimes and stalking to put him away for 15 years. My people made sure of it. Keisha's legs gave out. June Kai caught her before she hit the floor. 1 year later, Keisha stood on the rooftop of the Sentinel Tower, her hands resting on the safety railing, watching the sun set over Chicago. The city stretched out before her in shades of amber and gold, alive and electric and no longer terrifying. She heard the rooftop door open behind her, followed by familiar footsteps. You're going to freeze up here, June Kai said, draping his suit jacket over her shoulders. It smelled like his cologne, expensive and understated. I don't mind, she said, pulling the jacket closer. I like the view. He stood beside her, close enough that their arms touched. They had spent the last year in a careful dance, building trust in increments. Shared meals. Late-night conversations through the wall when her nightmares woke her. The slow, deliberate process of learning that not all strength was violent and not all protection came with strings attached. I got the partnership offer today, Keisha said quietly. At the legal aid clinic. They want me to lead the domestic violence division. June Kai turned to look at her, and the pride in his eyes made her chest tight. You're going to change lives. I already have mine changed. She met his gaze. Because of you. No, he shook his head. You did that yourself. I just made sure you had the space to do it. The wind picked up, carrying with it the sounds of the city below. Car horns, distant music, the hum of life continuing, indifferent and beautiful. Marcus's parole hearing was denied, June Kai said after a moment. He won't be eligible again for another 8 years. Keisha nodded. She had stopped checking the court records months ago, stopped letting Marcus's existence dictate her emotional state. He was a ghost now, powerless and distant. And you, she asked, how's the transition going? June Kai had been slowly dismantling the violent arms of Silver Dragon, redirecting his empire toward legitimate trade and strategic investments. It was dangerous work, renegotiating power with people who didn't believe in second chances. It's a process, he admitted, but it's the right one. Keisha reached out and took his hand. His fingers were warm, steady. Thank you, she whispered, for seeing me when I was invisible, for fighting when I couldn't. June Kai squeezed her hand gently. Always, he said. And for the first time in years, Keisha believed in that word. Thank you for staying until the end. That means more than you think. If this story touched something inside you, subscribe, like, and tell me what you felt in the comments. I read every single one because this isn't just storytelling, it's connection. And if you're ready for the next journey, don't wander too far. The next story is already waiting in the dark.